Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of Connor Group's Breakthrough Work podcast. I'm your host, Ravi Kumar, partner, national market leader at Connor Group. Connor Group is built for breakthroughs. We're a professional services firm focused on the most critical opportunities and challenges facing ambitious companies. As a leader in accounting, M&A, IPOs, and digital solutions, including AI and automation, we serve the offices of the CFO, CIO, CTO, and CHRO. Potential is all around us, but breaking through is rare. It requires vision, courage, tapping insights and expertise, overcoming big obstacles, and even a little luck. Breakthrough work lets leaders and companies who shattered the status quo tell their stories about getting to the other side. We talk with senior leaders from companies you know well and reveal what it took to make them the household names they are today. We also feature companies emerging quickly, the ones breaking through as we speak. They talk about what it's like to be in the moments defining their future. My guest today is my good friend, Janine Korovesis, VP of Finance at OpenAI. Janine, can you please introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a bit about your background?
Sure. Ravi, I'm really excited to be doing this with you today, first and foremost. So thank you for having me on your podcast. As you shared, I'm the VP of Finance at OpenAI, a company that folks may know well and hopefully have in their pockets via ChatGPT. I've been with the company for about 6.5 years, which if you think about, when we really came into being, into people's minds, into kind of the public sphere, that was about 2.5 years ago. So I've been building with the team for well before that. I came to OpenAI because I have always been drawn to really hard problems that companies are trying to solve in very unique ways. And I like things that are a little bit different. And so a huge part of what brought me to OpenAI was pretty much basically a recipe with all of those things. A super hard problem, trying to build AGI that benefits all of humanity. A really talented group of people that I hadn't seen in this kind of concentration before. And doing it in a way that it really played to my strengths. I mentioned liking to do things differently. OpenAI hasn't done anything by a pre-described playbook forever, really. And so that's been a huge challenge and a great opportunity that I'm looking forward to sharing more with you about.
Well, that's awesome, Janine. And I know you don't do podcasts, so I really appreciate you breaking your own rule for us and to do this together. So with that, we'll kick things off. I've got my first celebrity question. So I'll ask it this way. So what's it like to have quite possibly one of the most desirable senior finance roles in the hottest industry in the world?
Oh my gosh. Oh, wow. It's a lot of things all at once, honestly. And I think the first thing I'll say is it's humbling. I think a huge part of working for a company that is transforming the way that people access information, the way that they live their lives, there's a huge responsibility to that. And even though I'm not the one building the product, I'm not the one, creating the technology, I am part of the engine that is making sure that can all happen, right? Making sure that we're able to speak to our investors in a way that resonates with them, making sure that they have confidence in what we're doing with the funds that we've raised, right? So yeah, humbling is definitely, I think, the first way to think about it. Exciting is another thing. One thing I think about, Ravi, is, and I might have said to you before, if you're a good finance professional, you can find work anywhere, right? Like there's opportunities abound. You'll be able to put your skills to work. But to be able to do it for a company that is having such a profound impact in the world, as of today, I think over 500 million weekly active users, that's a significant portion of the world's population.
Yes,
and when you think about it that way, I think that you have to approach the role with, that kind of a bit of gravitas, right? Of like reality of what you are actually doing, and appreciation for the fact of how quickly it came about, right? And how much of an impact it really does already have. So yeah, long-winded way of saying humbling, exciting, awesome, probably, definitely the defining moment of my career so far and possibly for my entire career. We'll see.
Yeah, no, I've got a question on that a little bit later on where you go from here. You kind of hit a home run very early in your career, but No, so kind of playing off of that and what you shared a little bit earlier in our conversation about what drew you to OpenAI in terms of the problem. I mean, prior to joining OpenAI, you've worked for some of the most recognizable brands in the world. You and I both shared the experience of working at EY. So that's a globally recognizable accounting brand. You led finance roles at Google's Moonshot Factory. So what about this scrappy, not-for-profit upstart was really the, hey, you know what? I'm going to take a flyer on that company. Aside from, as you pointed out, some of the challenges and the problems that they were trying to solve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I think about the path to OpenAI, I know you mentioned, obviously, yes, my time with EY was amazing. It was foundational. It was, I think, a great opportunity to explore what different types of problems different industries face, right? I was an auditor. I got to peek behind the books of some really transformative companies. I think the most memorable one for me was the Mercantile Exchange in Chicago. I still have friends there, and it's incredible. But then, as I kind of progressed, from there, I went to a public company, or actually, before that, I went to a subsidiary of Citadel, also a very well-known company. So learned how to work in a super fast-paced environment, very cutthroat, very competitive. That my division was actually bought by a bank in Chicago. So the culture changed very quickly there. And then from there, I actually went to a company that I would never recommend anyone go to, in the sense that, when I joined the company after that, it was very much a trial by fire experience. I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, but the company, when I joined them, they had been delisted from the New York Stock Exchange recently. They were having to restate 5 years of revenue because they had recognized it improperly under GAAP. And they were under investigation for some of their revenue collection practices. So basically, like a perfect recipe for like disaster, right?
Sounds like the types of challenges that you draw yourself to that you can fix, right?
Yes, you'll see a through line here. Yeah. I thought that was so exciting. I was in my mid-20s. I was like looking for a new challenge. I knew someone that was working there, and they said, "Do you want to help me tackle this problem?" I was like, "Absolutely, I do." But the reason I say I wouldn't recommend anyone do that is, maybe do it once. Don't make it, like your MO. Don't always be running towards chaos. But that was such a formative experience of how to, stay calm in chaos. It's like that scene in The Departed where Leonardo DiCaprio's hand doesn't shake, and the finance equivalent of that. But anyways, so yeah, beyond that, having the opportunity to have that formative experience, right, and then moving on to Google X, as you mentioned, the Moonshot Factory was amazing. I had the opportunity to watch some of, again, extremely transformative technologies be developed there. Waymo is probably the one that people know the best. I helped build the finance function for that team. Another great thing about X was, I kind of viewed it as an opportunity. Again, I mentioned at EY, I got to see a lot of different industries. X was creating technologies across a whole host of different industries. There's self-driving cars. When I was there, it was also, Wing, the drone company. It was Makani, which was the wind energy kite company. Chronicle, which is a cybersecurity company. So it was all these different kind of opportunities for me to peek under the hood and figure out like what I really wanted to do. Although everything was really exciting, nothing really called to me, right? Like nothing was, I love cars. I'm from Detroit. I probably should have or could have jumped to Waymo. But I think when OpenAI came calling, I mentioned that the team really stood out, right? The mission also, I thought, was incredibly bold. Part of why I came to Google was because Google's mission is organize the world's information, make it universally accessible and useful. That is a hard problem to solve. And so when I thought about, well, like, what is the thing I can throw my weight behind, the next incredibly impactful mission, our mission is to make sure that AGI benefits all of humanity. If we're successful at that, that will have, profound impact on not just our generation, but generations to come. And so when Brad, he's our COO now, he was our CFO at the time when he hired me, when he and I started talking about, what OpenAI, could become, kind of what, the ambitions were for it, it was exhilarating. It was something that I hadn't felt so excited about a company and a technology in a long time. And to your point about, it was a nonprofit at the time, the technology wasn't well understood. I mean, I had people flat out tell me, don't take the job. That's not going to be, don't take the job. That's not going to be the company that, ends up building AGI. It's too much of a risk. Don't do it. And, thank goodness I didn't take that advice.
The I told you so conversation, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure you never did that.
For some reason, I don't hear from the people that said don't take that job very much these days. But it was fair, right? I mean, it was totally a gamble move. It was something that, I knew if it panned out, it would be, a home run, really a swing for the fences versus like, I'm not swinging to get on first base, right? So the nonprofit structure, I mean, it's still a part of, it's a huge part of how OpenAI operates today. The nonprofit has not gone away. I thought that was very interesting. It also governs, everything we do today, which is very unusual in a space like ours. But I think the exciting thing and the draw for me about it when I came to OpenAI was that not only were we trying to do this really bold thing, but we were doing it in a way that didn't have, I mentioned a playbook. No one has scaled a multi-billion-dollar company with a nonprofit at the helm and with such a bold mission accompanying it, right? So yeah, very glad I didn't listen to those people, but I think the reason why is just because I knew in my gut the group of people building this was so talented. And this was the place to really come and learn and grow as a professional. And quite frankly, just to, the place to put my chips.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in the first episode of our podcast, I talked to, Chris Lowe about, it's all about getting the right people on the bus, right? You don't have to know what everyone's ideal, highest and best use is within the company. That sort of stuff you can figure out, but it's really about, what problems you're trying to solve and being around the smartest people in the room and creating high performing teams that are just transformative. And only you are going to know your risk tolerance, right? Like, people told me, why are you joining this small firm in San Francisco when you've got KPMG and EY on your resume? And I'm like, you know what? I'll take a chance on it. It's worked out pretty well over the last 11 years, but
well, it's that chance to have an impact too. I mean,
yes.
Like what you have done in your role and with your role is beyond, I'm sure, whatever was scoped or sold to you, but it's because of that. It's because of that drive and that ambition that, it pushes you to make something wonderful out of what you're given.
No, and I think this is why you and I have gotten along all these years is that we're always going to be authentically ourselves and we're always going to embed our personal brand on anything that we do. And when someone tries to put a box around us, well, we're going to try and, take out our picks and shovels to see how we can find our way out of that box and, make something bigger and better. So, no, I love that story. Speaking of, our time at public accounting, and you and I had a fun discussion about this, and I'll let you use the term. So when I worked at KPMG, I worked on some of the largest companies in the world that if I was at a party, 75% of the people in the room would not know what that company was or what they did. And so you have a test that you apply. When did you know that OpenAI was going to be something that everyone would understand?
It was a bit of a progression, and I know the test you're referring to, and I will get to that. It was a bit of a progression, I will say. It was summer of 2022. I've been working for the company for, gosh, I think close to 3 years at that point, or I can't do math, close to 3 years or over 3 years at that point. And we were starting to see indications that our technology would actually, be picked up by the public. I think the first indication was DALL-E 2. I remember very specifically, we were in the backyard of one of my husband's friends out in the East Bay, and we were playing with DALL-E 2. And I was so excited to show them its capabilities. And the thing we kept generating was we asked for a photorealistic image of Chewbacca playing live at Woodstock in like 1969. And we had a great time with it, right? It
Very
was,
retro. I like it.
Yeah, I mean, it was so fun. And we spent a lot of time just creating images and laughing and having a great time. And I was like, wow, like I really think that, we're hitting something here. Like we're onto something. The next week I had basically the exact counterpoint to that, where I was talking about DALL-E at a professional event with a lawyer, who very bluntly told me, I don't see how this affects my life at all. It's like, wow,
thanks for the buzzkill. Yeah.
Exactly. Coming down from this high of being like, yes, like we're on the way. People are going to get it. Like, I'm not going to have to explain what AGI is soon. To then a very real reality check of like, no, there's still work to do. 6 months later, or probably less than that, right? We launched ChatGPT. And that's when, something really clicked there. We really moved from like the science aspect to the society aspect, right? And how did we do that? We made it accessible. We made it so that, myself and other folks at the company didn't have to do the explaining for the tools, for all of its, the great things it can do. It was self-explanatory. It became so accessible and so ubiquitous that you could just pick it up and interact, and you could get something that was meaningful to you from that, whether that was an answer about, a lot of people love to look at what should I cook for dinner tonight based on what's in my pantry, to something, more important of like, I have this medical condition that I'd love to learn more about. Can you help me with that? Right. But the day that really brought it home to me, and the day I knew that we had actually moved into, the mainstream, was when my mother-in-law said something to me about the technology. And that is my mother-in-law test. I know that once she has, when something has entered her realm, like it's really in the mainstream. And I had been talking to her for years about, the technology that we were building. And so when she came to me on a weekend, and I think it was something, she mentioned something about using it for gardening. She asked it a gardening question. She's a fabulous gardener. I took a beat and was like, did you say you used ChatGPT for that? And she said, I did. And it was great. And I was so impressed. I was so happy. Again, like not only because like it showed that we had, I think, reached a portion of society or the population or whatever that like otherwise would not have found us if it weren't valuable. But I was super proud now to actually see that the thing that the team had been working on for so long had finally found the place where it could really be a hit.
Well, and talk about, overnight success, from, let's call it 12 million in revenue to, over 12 billion in revenue in not very long a period. So that's pretty exciting stuff. And I can also say, and I don't even know if I've shared this with you, I've done everything from using ChatGPT to plan my itinerary for a trip across the country. I've used DALL-E 2 to design a custom logo for my golf bag, as well as another piece of artwork. And so, it is absolutely touching every aspect of daily lives, which is crazy. When I remember the day when you were sharing us an early beta for ChatGPT, and I hate to even put myself in the category of that, buzzkill lawyer that you spoke to, but I felt your enthusiasm and everything. And I was just like, okay, cool. That's fun. But I didn't feel it until you actually use it. And I think, the experience of using it and the speed, the efficiency, referencing, the largest database in the world, is pretty incredible. So, I'm not shocked that your mother-in-law, uses it for everything from gardening to cooking now.
Well, I want to see your golf bag design. I golf now. We should go golfing sometime.
Ooh,
but
absolutely.
I want to see that. It's very important.
I will. I'll show you that, as well as the artwork, which I won't disclose for the podcast, but I'll show you the artwork as well.
Fair enough.
So, I mean, obviously, we just talked about a breakthrough. What do you think would be the pivotal breakthrough moment for, at OpenAI, both for you personally as well as for the company? Was it, the launch of ChatGPT? I don't want to lead you too much. I want to, get your unfiltered thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't really know how you can point to anything but, the launch of ChatGPT as like the moment that really catapulted us into the next phase of who we are as a company. And so much has happened really since 2022. I really kind of mark my time at OpenAI. I mark my time at OpenAI as like pre-Chat GPT and post Chat GPT, right? That was a transformative moment for us. Not only, for it to be the point where we started delivering real value to people around the world, but also, the point in time where we really started growing up as a company. And the reason why I put it like that is because it's not to say that we hadn't, done any, maturing of our systems, our people, our processes before that. We definitely had. Kona Group was a part of that, right?
Yeah.
We had really sophisticated investors, of course, that had been interested in what we're doing for a long time. But when you come onto the global stage, and you come onto it in the way that we did, right? Very, very rapid, very loud, very exciting, right? You draw a lot of attention, all types of attention, right? Some of it wanted, some of it not wanted. And so, the breakthrough moment for us was absolutely at the launch of ChatGPT, because it really it was an inflection point in our trajectory of who we are, of how we operate. We were something like 300 people, I think, when ChatGPT launched in 2022. Today we're pushing on 3,000. And to have that type of a growth trajectory in 2.5 years, and not to mention, of course, the incredible revenue scale we've operated at as well. It's unprecedented. And I go back to, I say that with all the humility in the world, but it truly is unprecedented. So you have to make sure, me as a leader at the company, I have to make sure that people stepping inside those doors understand that, and they understand what they are actually becoming a part of, right? We are no longer a small, scrappy research lab, kind of tinkering in, a small building in the mission. We do still have elements of that in our culture, right? It is core to who we are, that experimentation, that curiosity, it can never and will never go away. But there's also a huge responsibility on the other side of that. I mentioned the 500 million weekly active users. What we do matters, right? So we have to keep that in mind all the time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, I just think about, some of those early conversations around, moving from the not-for-profit to preliminarily a for-profit. And, we laughed about ChatGPT when we were bringing that technology over of, is this going to be revenue generating? And, there was a period where we didn't have an answer for that, right? I mean, so that's a pretty solid shift from, great technology that, potentially has applications across a number of, modalities, but then now to be the massive revenue generator that it is. When did that moment shift from, hey, this is great technology, to this is revolutionary technology that is going to put OpenAI on the map?
Well, I will say the technology, I think, did a lot of the work for us, right? It really, and of course, the virality, I think, really made that shift for us very evident very quickly. I mean, ChatGPT was launched in late November 2022. We started selling subscriptions, if I recall, it was February or early March of 2023. And I remember after that first month of sales, I looked at my head of revenue when we did, report it out, and I looked at that number and I had to do a double take. And I was like, wait a second, that this is for 1 month. And she was like, yes, this is for 1 month, and at that point it was, more than we had done certainly more than we had done at any point prior to that. And it was just astounding. Right. And so at that point, it was kind of from that point on, I would say it really became like all hands on deck, like really realizing like where the company was going. Right. If we've had this much impact in 4 months, what are we going to have done after 4 years? And so we're still within those 4 years. So that question remains, unanswered. But if you just see the trajectory, right, of how far we've come, the last 2 odd years have really been a part of kind of trying to scale the fastest growing company of all time. Right. So the technology told us that it was time to grow and support it. And so here we are.
No, absolutely. And, I remember I think it was a Saturday afternoon, and I think I got a text message from you saying, hey, Brad and I need to speak to you. We've got a significant, arrangement that is underway, and obviously in reference to your partnership with Microsoft. And, that was kind of, I think, the aha moment for me of like, going from probably the most recognizable technology name of at least my generation to, creating what may be the most recognizable, brand in OpenAI of this and the future generations. Where were you and what were you doing when you kind of got that first call that, hey, by the way, Microsoft is looking to partner with OpenAI?
Mm-hmm. Microsoft coming on as a partner was actually pretty early in my time at OpenAI, which was great. I think they first invested in us in July 2019, and I'd been at the company maybe 6 or 7 months at that point. And to the point that you made about when a partner like Microsoft comes on board, one of the most transformative software companies of our time, I think it was the first indication to me that somebody else really got what we were doing, right? If you stood inside our 4 walls and the mission at our offices, everyone there got what we were doing, right? Our investors, our early investors, totally get what we are doing. But to see, to have Microsoft really, come on board and also, make sure that we have all the compute that we needed, to scale at the time, that was really, really encouraging. And when I remember, I'm sure you got many eager calls from me during that time because the way, again, in true OpenAI fashion, the way that we were partnering with Microsoft is incredibly unique, right? It reflected the uniqueness of the technology that we needed to build, the scale of supercomputers that are required to actually enable that. And so, yeah, luckily, Brad and I had talked about, having a large investor come in pretty shortly after I had joined the company. But when it really, the impressive part of it was just like how quickly we were able to get to that kind of first closing round with them and really, start the strategic relationships that, of course, we still have today. So to tie it back to one thing, too, that I mentioned a few minutes ago, the breakthrough point for us was really the launch of ChatGPT, right?
Yeah.
But I mentioned, we had been building very well before that, right? Again, much in part due to our partnership with Connor Group. But part of the reason why is because we've had a really strong, mature investor from very early on, right? And so you get this idea, or you get this awareness that what you do will be under a microscope. How big that microscope is really depends on your success, right? But when you come out of the gate with a strong partner like Microsoft, that first $1 billion investment, that is substantial, and that's going to get attention, right? Some great, some not great, like we talked about before. But yeah, Microsoft has been a strong partner to us, from the early days, and having them come on, in 2019 was definitely a great bet, or a great indicator that this was a good bet in terms of what was to come.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you go back to all those people that told you not to take the job, and you're like, hey, have you heard of this company called Microsoft? I know. I don't
do I told you so.
I know. Sometimes it's fun to just, I don't know, do it in a different way where you're like, I trust my own judgment. Thank you. It's like naming children. You're like, I really appreciate your input, but I don't really appreciate your input. So on that note, so obviously in this role, obviously you started out as the controller. You've expanded into a VP of finance role where you're expanding your finance team. Taking on challenges where you're doing new things, you're being tasked with ownership of areas that you haven't owned before. Did you ever at any point feel, oh my gosh, I'm in over my head, like I need some help, or I need a mentor, or am I cut out for this?
All the time.
Yeah.
I think the key to being comfortable in situations where you are not the expert in the room, right, is being confident in asking questions that you might think are really stupid. I do that all the time. I do run, so my teams today are, sorry, my cat. My teams today they span a lot of different disciplines, right? Controllership, which I am an expert in, I grew up in, but then there's tax, there's treasury, there's very advanced technical accounting, there's real estate and workplace. The thing I think that got me to where I am is that I know I can do things effectively, like in all of the realms that I oversee, right? Like I have something that I can add of value to all of my different leaders, right? But we're at a point now where, the people that I bring in to lead those different functions, they matter more. And so there's an element, I keep coming back to like humility, but in kind of maybe a different form this time. It's extremely important. Excuse me. It's extremely important for me as a leader to recognize like where I should not be making the decision, right? Or where I do not have the most informed point of view. And so what I've really tried to focus on, I would say last, year and a half or so, are bringing in the people that are the best in the world at what they do. Interesting story. When Sarah, our CFO, joined a little over a year ago, one of our first conversations that she and I had, I said to her, well, Sarah, I'm really excited, for you to come on, and there's a lot of things to do here. I just want you to know that I've built the best team in the world. So you don't need to worry about the folks that I have in my corner. Go out and do whatever you need to do, do fundraising, investor relations, right? And we've got our corner. We've got it, right? And she took me at my word, which is great.
So that can go either way as well. Yeah.
Yes, she took me at my word. And then, but truly though, the reason why I said that to her is because, to kind of your original question was, am I worried about what I do every day? Absolutely. I have a healthy fear that, something crazy will pop up, but we will handle it, right? Because I built the best team in the world. And when you've built an incredibly strong team around you, that kind of acts as the insulation, against problems or errors or whatever, something unexpected happens all the time. Mm-hmm. When you have that assurance, though, it enables other people in the business to go focus on what they need to, right? So for Sarah, we raised over $6 billion last fall, right? We've raised another $40 billion this year. And the reason why we can do that is because of the confidence that I have in the people that I brought in to kind of tackle those unknowns with me, right? So yes, I feel in over my head all the time, but there's no one in the world who can tell me how to scale a company that's moving as fast as we are, right? So you have to just draw on, what you've seen work in other situations. You have to trust that you have the best people in the world. And also just trust that the path will unfold the way it needs to in front of you.
Yeah. No, I know we talk about you being unflappable, and a lot of that is product of your upbringing, as well as the challenges that you've overcome in different companies that you've worked for. But you just basically dropped that. Oh, we raised $6 billion last year. We raised another $40 billion this year in just in regular conversation, and that's no small feat. I mean, that's more than probably several uber successful senior executives will raise in their entire career across several companies. So I think that one highlights just how you have to kind of temper your highs and lows to understand the scale at which the company is growing, but also just how massive this opportunity is, and the poise that you need to just kind of go with the flow a bit. So that was more of a compliment of how that's a huge evolution in a not long period of time that you've kind of just rolled with as the waves have come in and gone, right?
Well, totally. I mean, but I think fear can be a lot of things. Fear can be a motivator, right? It can be something that pushes you to just say, okay, there's this problem in front of me that no one's ever faced and no one has had the opportunity to tackle before. I'm going to go figure it out. Or fear can be a paralyzer. And when you find the place where you're paralyzed by your fear, that's probably the place where you need to let somebody else take over, right? But in our case, we're such a swing for the fences company. Like, we want to build incredible AGI for everyone, right? So you have to have this, you have to be confident in the thing that you're doing and in your own skills and capabilities. And the people that I've built around me, you have to, because if you don't have that confidence, why should somebody else have that confidence in you?
Yeah, I think I'm setting the bar for the folks that I have as guests on my on the podcast, because in every episode, well, thus far through two, it's the
Mm-hmm.
go big or go home approach, and I
Mm-hmm.
feel like that sort of ambition, the drive to be great is so critical. And yeah, it's, you can run away from the storm or you can run towards it, and I think it takes a certain DNA, not only for individuals, but for a company, to really take on those challenges and change cultural norms, change industries, disrupt legacy technologies. And so yeah, I think finding the right people to get on the bus is so critical on that. Speaking of which, having a brand like OpenAI is such a massive recruiting tool, but then you're probably constantly balancing, okay, what should we try and tackle internally versus what do we leverage external providers for? Talk a little bit about that decision-making process for you. Obviously, we've, loved being on the journey with you, but, how does that thought process kind of manifest in your eyes?
Yeah. It's evolved over time, right? And I think that for any good finance leader, your approach towards, what you have your internal teams handle versus what you rely on the external expertise of others to solve, it should be something that evolves and flexes as your business changes. In the earliest days, I think that you guys were one of the first phone calls that I got when I joined OpenAI. And part of that was because, I stepped in the door, day one. Brad asked me if I can stand up an ERP in 30 days. I wipe the sweat off my brow and then try and figure out the question he's actually answering, or a question he's actually asking me. But joking aside, I step in the door and my job is to analyze what needs to be done, right? So
Yeah.
put that short list in front of me, right? And then you kind of just have to ruthlessly prioritize, what is the thing that only I can do versus what is the thing that someone with more experience in a particular area will do better than me, right? Theme of humility keeps coming back up. Like, you cannot be too proud to go ask for an expert to step into the room with you.
Yeah.
And so for the earliest days, it was honestly it really wasn't a decision for me. Like, I knew I didn't want to prematurely grow a really big internal team. I needed our financials to be sound and reliable and something that I could speak with confidence about. So it was a no-brainer, right? Connor Group came in, you guys helped me set up that ERP I referenced. It didn't happen in 30 days, as it shouldn't. That's crazy. But it did happen really fast. It happened, I think, definitely within a period of a quarter. And a huge part of why we were able to do that was because I was very realistic about what I knew your teams could do for me in short order versus what I could do for myself, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that that's really important. I talk to a lot of up and coming finance leaders and small startups, like OpenAI was 6 years ago. I talk to them a lot about that today, of like, what type of provider should you bring in? What type of services do you need? And you really have to get to the point where you're focusing on the 2 or 3 things that they're going to do the best. For you guys, it was getting, my ERP up and running. It was also the technical element, helping me think about some of those really interesting first contracts that we had with Microsoft, right? And other providers. So the balance in the early days, I think it was quite obvious, the right choice was to lean into someone who would help me set this up really well and would complement my own, operational experience in really getting OpenAI off the ground. Today, I wouldn't say that, we haven't had a wholesale change in how we think about in-house expertise versus external expertise, but as it should, the balance has shifted, right? We're running a global company. I keep coming back to the 500 million weekly active users. I say it loud and proud. We have customers all over the globe, right? So there's a difference in obligation today for who we are as a company versus who we were 6 years ago, right? So for me, the balance today really looks at, is this something that's going to be an ongoing need that we really do need to have our own kind of internal capabilities around, right? Tax is a great example. I need a lot of really incredible in-house tax experts because of how unusual our structure it is. It is our job to know the intricacies and the nuances and to advocate for the uniqueness of our structure, right? But there's also a balance, as tariffs is the counterpoint to that. I don't think, that it wouldn't have been efficient to not bring in external help on understanding the impact of tariffs, because there are folks that are looking at that exclusively, right?
Yeah.
So finding that balance is super important. I think every finance leader needs to be reassessing it constantly, but also have a trusted partner. I mean, like, I know if I call you and I say, do you think this is something you could help with? I know you're going to give me an honest answer, which it isn't always the case, right? I don't think that is something that everyone has, but I wish it were, right? A real sounding board to say, like, can you help me with this? Should I build this on my own? And getting kind of a real answer that you can actually make a decision based off of.
No, I appreciate that response, and I've always told my teams as well as my clients that at least my secret to an enduring long-term relationship is that balance of credibility and likability. Credibility without likability makes it a transactional relationship because, frankly, you just don't want to work with those people. And then likability without credibility tends to be a bit more surface level. It's a fun social conversation, but unfortunately, it's not the one that you call when you're in the trenches going through some pretty hard stuff. So, it's something that I've always subscribed to. It's, core to kind of who I am. So unfortunately, you're always going to get my authentic perspective because I don't really know how to do anything different.
Fortunately, that is good for me.
Yeah. Even if it's not always, the answer that someone wants to hear, but and obviously, kind of focusing on, I guess, a tangential question of that internal, external focus. Connor Group has invested heavily in generative AI tools. We leverage ChatGPT as well. We're partnering with a new finance tool, Numero, and I think that's really kind of where the world of accounting is going, at the risk of job security in the accounting profession. But I do think efficiency is always welcome in any industry. Should finance teams, this is kind of probably the biggest softball question I'm going to ask you all day. Should finance teams leverage AI in finance and accounting? And how does OpenAI leverage AI in accounting and finance?
100%. If you're not using AI in your finance team today, my question to you is why? But in all honesty, I have a lot of conversations with CFOs, with finance leaders about, using AI within their function. And I still hear people saying to me, like, well, I'm going to wait, I want to see what develops. I want to see what this does. And I guess, like, companies need to move at their own pace. I fully support that. I think the question I would have back to people who are not using AI today in their functions is what advantage do you think you're giving yourself by not, right? Because if you're going to make this choice based on, what can the tool, do for me? What can it accelerate for the team? How can it make my close process better, right? You have there's obvious returns there. If you're actively choosing not to use these tools, my question again would be, why? What is the edge that you're giving yourself? Another fun like number I like to share with finance leaders is my team today is about 20% of the size of the average team size for a company of our revenue scale. 20%. So for every 10 people that my peers hire, I hire 2. And it's not that those 2 people are being, less effective or less efficient or, not as fast as their counterparts. I close the books in 5 days. I report every quarter. I've had audited financial statements for dating back to when I walked in the door at OpenAI. So it's not, there's really, I think there's this need to dispel this myth that, like, using AI in your teams is something that, you don't need, or that you can do without, or you can achieve the results you need without it. We've seen just so many opportunities where our team has been transformed just by using our tech. We actually did a hackathon 2 days ago.
I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah. And every finance leader should be doing hackathons because it's this really interesting, Robbie, I'm seeing this transformation of, like, finance transformation used to be really kind of, step changes. You would have your finance transformation org who would then take on a big project, and it would be, a multi-year, like, step by step. There's still space for that. But what ChatGPT has actually done is it's transformed, I think, everyone in a finance org to what I call, like, micro transformers. You don't need to wait to be in the queue of, what is the big project that's going to come down this quarter. If you have a problem with, data ingestion, or if you have a problem with analytics that, you need some more horsepower to solve, you have that at your fingertips now. I know I'm being long-winded, but I'm so excited about this topic. A really great example that I love to give to everyone, because I think it will resonate with everyone, is, the month I mentioned that we started selling ChatGPT in 2023, and my eyes bugged out of my head at, the revenue jump. That was the exciting thing. The thing that brought me back to earth was, we looked at generally our tax transaction file that we downloaded from our system was something like 10,000 rows, and it would be very easy for us to manipulate, right? The month after we launched ChatGPT Plus, that file became 10 million rows. 10 million rows. So in the span of 30 days, right? And so from a finance leader, the challenge I'm describing, it's something that should be familiar to you regardless of, whether your fact pattern is the same or the situation is the same. Everyone has dealt with an explosion in data that they can't handle easily, right?
Yeah.
So for us, we didn't have corp end resources. We were 350 people. We did not have the ability, we didn't want to delay our close indefinitely. So we used ChatGPT. We actually just asked ChatGPT, I have a 10 million row Excel file. Like, how can I process this and analyze it the way that I need to? And it gave us the answer. So the question I'll come back to for finance leaders is, if you aren't empowering your employees to use these tools, why not? Like, what's holding you back? There's so much possibility. And I think that the sooner you can empower people to be micro transformers and to really kind of take hold of their own, destiny, so to speak, the better off your team will be.
I can't wait to see the title Micro Transformer in folks' titles on LinkedIn. But
everyone
I love
should
that.
Be a micro transformer.
And I'm not going to lie, when you first said that, I thought of like mini robots running around. But that's just what's wrong with my
Maybe
head.
That's the next iteration. No, spot on. Well, but there is. I won't go too far into a tangent here, but there is going to be so much capability from our tools. We haven't totally displaced the full transformation function. We have a fabulous head of finance systems that works within our team now. And she is doing incredible things with her team in terms of data transformation and internal processes, which I'm excited to come to our customers soon. But they really are changing the way that our teams interact with data, moving from very kind of within a system, very regimented, very like siloed in some cases, to just natural language interaction, which is so exciting.
Yeah. You talked a bit, and this was super helpful on just, your journey, obviously the accounting and finance journey. OpenAI being a company of its size now, raising the capital that it's raised, to your point, it's a source of opportunity, but it's also, potentially a bullseye on your back. How was that period of, let's call it, for lack of a better term, a little bit of chaos with some cover page news with Sam's ousting by the board. As a company that is scaling and has more things than you can probably accomplish in a day, how do you deal with all of that existential noise that while you're still trying to do your jobs and run the fastest growing company in the world?
Yeah. I get asked that question a lot from my friends, from my family of, I saw another headline about OpenAI, or what's happening, right? Or is everything okay? And, on one hand, like, again, you have to come back to the humility point. Like, it is a really, really privileged position to be in, to have the world be so interested in what you're doing. Right. And so I think that you need to approach that with, just a sense of realism. Like, it's probably not gonna stop, right? We get that questions also too from our partners, like, well, you're in the news again, right? But the thing that, keeping kind of an even keel with the team, keeping, my own obviously even keel, I think is super important. It actually, Robbie, it doesn't distract us because we know what we're building, right? We have a really strong sense of ownership, right? We have a really strong sense of purpose. Like, everyone that's on my team is, generally speaking, someone I have personally vetted. Even today, right? I have over 100 and some odd people in my org, and they're all people that, I have personally spoken to or I interviewed, right? To look for that kind of unflappability, right?
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of noise. It's going to kind of be going on at all times, but do you have the ability to really kind of stay focused and stay looking at what's in front of you, right? One step foot in front of the other. And, the events of 2022, it was not a financial question, right? But I think the one thing I will say about that is that, it was really powerful in that moment to be able to say that we had, our financials were very high integrity. They were, immutable. I was extremely proud of all the work that we had done up until that point. So if it had been a question, I had full confidence, in the work that me and my team had produced. But in any case, the unflappability, I think, is important. And I think just the ability to really keep your eyes on the work that you're doing and understand how that's connected to the bigger purpose and not be distracted by both positive and negative chatter outside of our walls.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, pressure is a privilege, right? And so I oftentimes like to think about that. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I feel, once again, humility. I just spoke with one of my team members. I told him one of their superpowers is just humility and positivity. And I do think that is absolutely something that can get you through some pretty tough times. I'll tell one other funny story. When I was moving overseas and joining a firm, I had to take a personality survey. And one of the questions, you do it in a time intense manner. And I'm not saying that OpenAI adopts this, but one of the questions at like the end of a short period that you have to answer a bunch of questions was, when you get stressed, you like to set things on fire, true or false? And my initial question or thought was, who answers yes to this question? But maybe some people can't help themselves. So I'm guessing that you're definitely getting people that aren't setting things on fire when, stuff hits the fan.
No, definitely not. That is, I do want to see the broader results of your personality test, though. I would love to.
Those are private, Janine, but you probably know most of the outcomes anyway.
Fair.
Well, we talked about, this job being, it's a job, it's a career, it's an opportunity that you have hit a home run at OpenAI. I mean, what's next for you personally? How do you top, the success that you've had at OpenAI? Is it a launching pad to something, I don't know, something bigger? I don't know what can be bigger than OpenAI right now. And, what's next for the company? Are you happy being the largest private company? Is this an IPO candidate? How do we think about your personal journey going forward as well as OpenAI's?
I've never really like planned out my career step by step. And I don't know if I should be like, ashamed to admit that. But the thing that I've always kind of gone after is challenges, right? I've chased challenges. Yeah. I've chased exciting technologies. I've never really chased like titles. And I think that has served me really well up until this point. So, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'm going to continue to work on the things that challenge me, the things that have meaning, things that I think are having impact, right? In terms of like what interests me like now too, the thing I am actually really excited to see is how AI continues to evolve healthcare. Like I think that healthcare is an area that is going to be really well served by AI. And, there's obviously like the kind of grandiose ideas of like, curing cancer or solving death. But before that, I think that there's a lot of really incredible impact that we're already seeing, helping doctors diagnose conditions or even just helping them help take notes, right? There are things like kind of micro transformations within each industry that I think are going to really kind of build the importance of, or the prevalence of better healthcare for everyone. The reason why I say that is because, in the same way that when I was at Google X, like I was kind of always like observing the different technologies that were being developed in front of me, right? The most interesting thing to me was, and still continues to be, generative AI. But I really am really looking forward to seeing where generative AI in healthcare goes next. I think if done well, that will impact literally everyone, right? Everyone's families, themselves. So that is a huge mission. In terms of kind of, what's next for the company, I mean, the thing about us is we ship, right? Like, I don't know if you've noticed, but like we ship constantly. Even in just the last like 6 months alone, we've released Operator, we have deep research, image gen. There's so many incredible technologies, even, just being built on top of our tech that are coming out all the time. I think for me personally, I really loved memory. the memory capabilities within our tools. And I think that is really that's going to, I think, be really valuable to our users going forward. If you have a system that knows you and knows your preferences and knows your schedule and your family and details about your life, et cetera, that's going to result in some pretty powerful recommendations that are catered specifically to you, right? It's something that, has existed for time. Like, right, if you have like a family doctor you've worked with for a very long time, like, great, they probably know so much about you, right? They're going to be able to cater things specifically to you. But if you think about having that same benefit across every single domain, whether it's medical care, whether it's like personal preferences, whether it's, writing, whether it's interviews,
Yeah.
I did use ChatGPT to prepare for this interview. I hope you did too.
Yeah, I did use ChatGPT for some of the questions, but in the true spirit of being authentic, I did 90% of it myself and only used ChatGPT for like 10% of the questions.
Fair enough. I think that's a very reasonable balance. For me, the balance was, well, I have we were talking about personalization. My ChatGPT knows me very well. And so it knows, the things that I want to talk to you about, Robbie. I give it the context on who you are and our relationship. And so it's all kind of pulling this back to like what's next for OpenAI. I think continuing to develop, the tool that is the most useful for everyone, that benefits them in their daily life, like that is really what we're focused on, is creating something that brings transformative capabilities to everyone.
Yeah. I want to go back to your comment about the application of AI in healthcare. I'm involved with an early stage healthcare focused venture fund called Wavemaker 360 Health. Their latest fund focuses on AI as an accelerator. I'm also involved with a lot of digital health companies, as you know, that use AI as an accelerator. And I think the application of agentic AI in healthcare is the future, and probably a separate conversation that you and I will have. But I'll ask one final question. One, you've been so gracious with your time. I know you've probably got 100 emails in just the hour we've spent together. But this is kind of a question that I ask very successful executives on. Success is a trade-off, right? If you're succeeding in something, that means that something else hasn't gotten all of your attention. So the question I ask is, if you could do it all over again, would you do the same thing, or would you do some things differently?
We're getting into the personals here. I actually did. I know it's all right. I'm here for it. I actually was thinking about this pretty deeply a few weeks ago. And, where I net out is that I would still make the choices that I've made over the last 6.5 years. I'm incredibly proud of them. It's a huge part of, my identity. I love the people that I work with. I get to enjoy my job. Like, not a lot of people get to say that, right?
Yeah.
And I am part of this story of something that has completely changed the world. I could end the sentence there and I wouldn't need to say anything else, right?
Yeah.
But yes, has it come at sacrifices? Absolutely. And I think that it's important, to be honest about that, because to your point, it looks different for every person that's successful, right? The sacrifices or the trade-offs that they've made, but there is always something on the other side of it. So for me, I am very fortunate to have, a very understanding husband and a very understanding family that is not only just understanding, but also they're champions for me, right? They love seeing my success. They wish they got to see more of me and less of me on my computer. But there's a huge, I think, just it's so important to me to know that I have their support, that I don't think that if I didn't have it, I would have been able to do what I've done for the last 6.5 years, right? It truly does take a really strong system to build every successful person, company, whatever. So yeah, no regrets. But I'm also hopeful that, with the introduction of really strong technology, right, there will be ways for me to continue to be really great at what I do, and maybe spend some more time with family, or spend some more time, not on a computer, and not to like segue into like, oh, well, what are we going to do with what is AI going to look like once it leaves your computer, right?
Yeah.
I think that, we obviously have some really exciting work going on with Johnny Ives and IO to figure out what that might look like.
Yeah.
But that will be such a really interesting and transformative next step for technology too, right? If it's no longer in your computer and if it's something that you can, interact with in a different way, I think that that will present a lot of really unique opportunities. But I got back to talking about technology when you asked me about trade-offs. So clearly I am a devout technologist.
Hey, that's one hell of a teaser. Talking about Johnny and Io. So, Janine, it's always a pleasure. Now our normal friendly catch ups are now in the public domain with this conversation. But I
Good.
really want to just say congratulations on everything you've accomplished personally. I want to say thank you for everything you and OpenAI have done for this path towards safe artificial general intelligence, and frankly the applications that we've used as a firm and for me personally. So it's been an absolute pleasure, and I really wanted to thank you again.
Thanks, Robbie, for the opportunity. I'm very happy to have done my first podcast with you. And thanks to you and Connor Group for being a huge part of our success and story, too.
Absolutely. Thank you, Janine.